I'm a licensed clinical therapist at the Tennessee Valley Mental Health Institute in Nashville, Tennessee. Or I was, until I tendered my resignation just last month. You may refer to me as Dr. Laura Bennett, though for the 15 years I spent practicing there, most colleagues simply called me Dr. Bennett. During my tenure, I encountered every conceivable condition within clinical psychology: severe depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, and nearly every form of trauma the human psyche can endure. However, the particular case I'm about to recount is the one that profoundly altered my understanding of consciousness, memory, and the very essence of human identity, ultimately prompting my departure from the profession altogether. The Tennessee Valley Mental Health Institute is a comprehensive psychiatric facility proudly serving the greater Nashville metropolitan area and its surrounding counties. It's a contemporary complex constructed in the early 2000s, featuring specialized units for inpatient care, outpatient therapy, and residential treatment programs. Annually, the facility manages approximately 12,000 patients across all its services. My specialization there was in trauma therapy and dissociative disorders, primarily involving patients who had endured severe childhood abuse, combat trauma, and intricate psychological conditions necessitating intensive, long-term treatment. The case I am preparing to share with you commenced on a humid Thursday afternoon in March 2023. It was a quintessential Tennessee spring day, the air thick and charged, with storm clouds gathering ominously over the distant Cumberland River. I had been attending to patients since 8 a.m., and by 3 p.m., I eagerly anticipated my final appointment of the day and the approaching weekend. My 3 p.m. slot was designated for a new patient intake, someone referred by Dr. Daniel Foster from the Emergency Psychiatric Services at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The referral notes were exceptionally concise. Adult female, approximately 28 years old, found wandering downtown Nashville 3 days earlier with no identification and no memory of how she had gotten there. She had received a clean bill of health at Vanderbilt, showing no signs of drug or alcohol use, no head trauma, and no evidence of physical abuse or assault. The preliminary diagnosis indicated dissociative amnesia, potentially linked to a traumatic event, though no specific trauma had been identified. The patient had been cooperative during her evaluation at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, but steadfastly maintained a complete lack of memory concerning her identity, her past, or any events preceding her discovery by Metro Nashville police officers near the Shelby Street Bridge. At precisely 3:05 p.m., my receptionist, Janet Miller, gently tapped on my office door. "Dr. Bennett, your 3 o'clock appointment is here, but there's something you should know. She doesn't have any paperwork with her, no insurance cards, no identification. The hospital sent over her medical records, but that's all we have." I inquired, "Did she fill out our standard intake forms?" Janet responded, "She tried, but she left most of it blank. Name, address, emergency contact, medical history, everything. She said she can't remember any of it." While I had encountered cases of dissociative amnesia before, they were notably rare in clinical practice. Most instances of memory loss had clear organic origins, such as head injuries, strokes, or degenerative diseases. Psychological amnesia, where memories are suppressed or blocked due to trauma, was far less common and frequently temporary. I proceeded to the waiting room to meet my new patient and immediately noticed something distinctly unusual about her demeanor. She sat perfectly still in one of our standard waiting room chairs, her hands clasped in her lap, gazing straight ahead with an expression of profound calm. Typically, most new patients, especially those grappling with memory loss or trauma, exhibit some signs of anxiety, confusion, or distress. Yet, this woman appeared to be in a meditative state. She seemed to be in her late 20s, with dark brown hair neatly pulled back into a simple ponytail, dressed in plain jeans and a gray sweater that looked both new and expensive, though devoid of any visible brand labels or tags. Her posture was remarkably erect, almost militarily precise. When she turned to acknowledge me, her eye contact was direct and unwavering. "Hello, I'm Dr. Bennett," I stated, extending my hand. "You must be—" She simply replied, "I don't know," shaking my hand with a firm, confident grip. "That's why I'm here, I suppose." Her voice was clear and articulate, carrying a subtle accent I couldn't quite place. There was no tremor, no hesitation, none of the uncertainty one would anticipate from someone experiencing severe memory loss. As we walked back to my office, I observed that she moved with an uncommon sense of purpose and awareness, meticulously taking in details of the hallway, the other office doors, and the building's layout. An observation that struck me as methodical rather than merely curious. "Please have a seat wherever you're comfortable," I offered, gesturing towards the seating options in my office. I always allowed new patients to choose their seat as a means of offering them some control over their environment and helping them feel more at ease. She selected the chair positioned directly opposite my desk, settled into it with impeccable posture, and waited for me to commence the session. There was no fidgeting, no nervous glances around the room, no questions about the process or what to anticipate. It was as if she had navigated this scenario countless times before. "I'd like to begin by asking you to recount the last thing you remember clearly," I stated, retrieving my intake forms and clinical notepad. "I remember waking up on a bench near the river 3 days ago. It was early morning, perhaps 6 o'clock or 6:30, judging by the light. I was wearing these clothes, though I have no recollection of putting them on. I had no identification, no belongings, no sense of how I had arrived there." I probed further. "What did you do when you realized you couldn't remember anything?" "I sat on the bench for approximately 2 hours, attempting to access any memories from before that morning. When nothing materialized, I began walking through the city to see if anything looked familiar. Eventually, I approached a police officer and explained my situation." Her description was remarkably detailed and organized for someone supposedly experiencing severe amnesia. She articulated her experience with a clinical detachment that mirrored how I might describe a case to a colleague. "How are you feeling about not being able to remember your past?" I inquired. "I find it interesting rather than distressing," she responded. "Most people seem to expect that I should be upset or frightened by the memory loss, but I don't feel that way. It's more like a puzzle to be solved than a tragedy to be endured." This response was the first element that genuinely struck me as unusual. Patients with dissociative amnesia typically experience significant emotional distress regarding their memory loss. The inability to recall one's identity, relationships, or personal history is profoundly disorienting and frightening for most individuals. This patient's serene acceptance of her situation was inconsistent with everything I knew about trauma-related memory disorders. "Have you experienced any flashes of memory, dreams, or moments when something seemed familiar since you were found?" I questioned. "No specific memories, but I seem to have retained certain skills and knowledge. I know how to read and write. I can perform mathematical calculations. I understand complex concepts and vocabulary. I appear to be fluent in at least 3 languages, English, Spanish, and what I believe might be French, though I have no memory of learning them." "Which languages feel most natural to you?" She paused for a moment, as if carefully deliberating. "That's an intriguing question. All 3 feel equally natural, as if I acquired them simultaneously rather than sequentially. But there are moments when I feel like there might be other languages as well, words or phrases that seem familiar, but that I can't quite access." I devoted the subsequent hour to conducting a standard psychological assessment, evaluating her cognitive function, memory capacity, and emotional state. Her performance was exceptional. Her IQ appeared to be considerably above average. Her vocabulary was extensive and sophisticated, and her reasoning abilities were outstanding. She could execute complex mental calculations, recall and analyze detailed information I provided during our session, and exhibit problem-solving skills indicative of advanced education or training. However, when I inquired about autobiographical memories, family relationships, childhood experiences, or personal preferences, she had no access to any of that information. "Do you have any sense of what you might have done for work?" I asked. "Based on my apparent skills and knowledge base, I would surmise something requiring analytical thinking, attention to detail, and the ability to process complex information quickly. Perhaps something in research, analysis, or assessment of some kind. What about personal preferences? Foods you like or dislike, types of music, hobbies? I don't seem to possess strong preferences about anything. When the hospital staff asked me what I wanted to eat, I told them anything would be fine, and I genuinely meant it. I appear to be equally comfortable with any type of food, music, or activity. This was another significant red flag. Even patients with severe amnesia typically retain some emotional responses to different stimuli. They might not remember why they preferred classical music to jazz, but the emotional response would still be present. This patient displayed no preferential responses to anything. As our session progressed, I began to perceive subtle inconsistencies in her presentation that defied alignment with any recognized memory disorder. She claimed to have no memory of her past, yet her behavior suggested extensive familiarity with psychiatric evaluation and therapy. She seemed to anticipate my inquiries, settling into the chair with an air that suggested she was quite at home in a clinical environment. Her use of therapeutic terminology was precise, clearly indicating prior exposure to mental health treatment. "Have you ever undergone therapy before?" I inquired, getting straight to the point. "I don't recall being in therapy," she replied, "but I seem to grasp the process and the language linked with psychological treatment." "What do you understand about your presence here?" I continued. "You are attempting to ascertain whether my memory loss is organic, implying a physical, cerebral issue, or psychological, signifying trauma or stress from which my mind is shielding me by obstructing access to particular memories." This was a textbook description of dissociative amnesia, typically requiring several sessions to convey to a patient. Her grasp of intricate psychological concepts demonstrated a depth that pointed either to professional training or extensive personal experience with mental health care. I opted for a different tactic. "I'm going to vocalize some words, and I want you to share the very first thing that comes to mind, even if it strikes you as illogical." "Childhood." "Nothing." "Mother." "Nothing." "Father." "Nothing." "Home." "Nothing." "Hospital." She paused for the first time since our session commenced. "Assessment." "What sort of assessment?" I probed. "I'm not certain. The term assessment resonates as significant, yet I cannot grasp why." "School training." "What kind of training?" "I don't know, but it was comprehensive and intense." I pressed on with the word association exercise, and a distinct pattern began to emerge. Words pertaining to personal relationships, emotions, or familial connections elicited no response whatsoever. Conversely, terms related to evaluation, analysis, testing, and professional or academic environments immediately garnered recognition. "Allow me to ask you something different," I proposed. "If I were to suggest that I believe you are fabricating your memory loss, how would that make you feel?" For the first time since our meeting, her perfectly composed demeanor subtly shifted. It wasn't anger or defensiveness, which would be typical reactions to such a charge. Instead, it was closer to curiosity or an intellectual engagement. "That would indeed be a plausible hypothesis to consider," she stated. "What evidence led you to that conclusion?" This was the response of someone well-versed in analytical thought, not the reaction of a traumatized patient accused of deception. Following that initial session, I was convinced that this particular case held far more complexity than a simple diagnosis of dissociative amnesia. I scheduled follow-up appointments twice weekly and initiated more specialized evaluations to decipher the true nature of this patient's condition. Over the subsequent 3 weeks, I administered every psychological test and assessment tool available at our facility. The results were consistently perplexing. Her cognitive abilities across all domains were exceptional. Her emotional responses remained remarkably muted and controlled. Her knowledge base seemed to encompass an advanced understanding of psychology, neuroscience, research methodology, and data analysis. Crucially, she displayed no indicators of trauma response, no hypervigilance, no startle reactions, no anxiety or depression, no sleep disturbances or nightmares. Patients experiencing trauma-induced amnesia typically exhibited clear signs of underlying psychological distress, even if they could not recall the specific events that triggered their condition. This patient, however, evinced no psychological distress whatsoever. During our fourth session, I chose to directly address my observations with her. "I wish to share something with you," I began. "In 15 years of clinical practice, I have never encountered a presentation quite like yours. Your memory loss is absolute and consistent, yet you manifest none of the emotional or psychological symptoms typically associated with dissociative amnesia. What do you believe that signifies?" she asked. "I believe you know precisely who you are and why you are here." She regarded me for a prolonged moment with those same serene, analytical eyes. "Those are very logical inquiries, Dr. Bennett. However, I believe the more vital question is whether you are prepared for answers that might challenge your comprehension of how memory, identity, and consciousness truly function." The way she uttered these words sent a shiver down my spine. It was not a threat, but a stark warning. "I am a psychologist," I asserted. "I have been trained to manage complex and challenging cases. Whatever your situation may be, I am thoroughly prepared to assist you in working through it." She leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since I had met her, a smile touched her lips. It was neither a warm nor a comforting smile. It was the kind of smile that implied she possessed a profound secret unknown to me. "Dr. Bennett, what if I were to tell you that everything you understand about human memory and identity is fundamentally constrained? What if I were to tell you that the concepts of individual consciousness and permanent identity, which form the bedrock of your therapeutic approach, are far more pliable than you acknowledge?" "I would contend that sounds like an interesting philosophical discussion," I replied, "but it does not address my questions regarding your identity and purpose here." "Fair enough. My name, or at least the one I have been using most recently, is Dr. Rebecca Sloan. I hold a doctorate in experimental psychology from Stanford University, with specialized training in memory research and consciousness studies. I am employed by a research institute that investigates unusual neurological and psychological phenomena." "What kind of research institute?" I pressed. "The kind that examines cases which do not fit within conventional medical or psychological categories. The kind that studies individuals who experience things that challenge our current understanding of the human mind." "And why were you discovered without identification, presenting as an amnesia patient?" "Because I volunteered to undergo an experimental procedure engineered to temporarily suppress autobiographical memories while leaving cognitive and procedural memories intact. The objective was to ascertain whether trained observers could differentiate between genuine trauma-induced amnesia and artificially induced memory suppression." I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me. "You are telling me that your memory loss was artificially induced as part of some kind of experiment?" "That is correct. And you, Dr. Bennett, along with the staff at OSU and everyone else who evaluated me, were unwitting participants in a study designed to assess diagnostic accuracy in cases of unusual memory presentation." "That is completely unethical. You cannot conduct research on people without their informed consent." "You are absolutely correct, which is why the study has been terminated, and I am here to provide you with full disclosure about what transpired." Over the next 2 hours, Rebecca, if that truly was her name, unfolded a narrative even more unsettling than I had imagined. According to her account, she worked for a private research institute named the Institute for Consciousness Studies, funded by a combination of government agencies and private technology companies. The institute investigated unusual instances of memory, consciousness, and identity that could not be explained by conventional neuroscience or psychology. We study individuals who claim to recall past lives, people who appear to share memories with family members they have never met, cases where patients demonstrate knowledge or skills they should not possess, and situations where consciousness seems to persist in ways that defy contemporary scientific understanding. "That sounds like pseudoscience," I interjected. "I comprehend your skepticism. 5 years ago, I would have concurred with you, but I have encountered cases that cannot be explained by any conventional model of how memory and consciousness operate." She then described her own case as a test of an experimental technique capable of temporarily blocking access to autobiographical memories without affecting other cognitive functions. The aim was to create an artificial amnesia that would be indistinguishable from trauma-induced memory loss. The procedure entails a combination of pharmaceutical intervention and targeted electromagnetic stimulation of specific brain regions. It is crafted to temporarily disrupt the neural pathways that connect personal memories to conscious awareness, all while preserving language skills and intellectual abilities. And you voluntarily underwent this procedure? I did. The research team sought to determine if mental health professionals could differentiate between genuine dissociative amnesia and artificially induced memory suppression. Your diagnostic accuracy and the treatment approaches you employed were part of the data we were collecting. How many other therapists were unknowingly involved in this study? I asked, my voice tinged with incredulity. Across the country, approximately 40 mental health professionals evaluated similar cases over the past 2 years. The objective was to develop superior diagnostic criteria for authentic dissociative disorders and to understand the limitations of current assessment methods. I was appalled by the ethical ramifications of her description. This constitutes a massive violation of professional ethics and research protocols. Mental health professionals cannot be utilized as unwitting research subjects. You are correct, which is why the study has been discontinued, and all participants are currently being debriefed about their involvement. So your memories are returning now? I inquired. The effects of the procedure began to subside about a week ago. I have been progressively regaining access to my autobiographical memories, though the process has been unusual. Unusual how? The memories are not returning in chronological order, and some of them feel different than they did prior to the procedure. It appeared as though the induced amnesia not only affected my capacity to recall memories, but also altered the very nature of those memories. What precisely do you mean by that? I inquired. Rebecca remained silent for a considerable period, and for the first time in our acquaintance, she seemed genuinely distraught. Dr. Bennett, she began, her tone serious, I need to share something with you that will undoubtedly sound unbelievable, but I implore you to listen carefully and maintain an open mind. I'm listening, I affirmed. When my memories started to resurface, she continued, I discovered that some of them are not my own. I possess vivid, detailed recollections of events I never personally experienced, conversations in which I never participated, and places I've never visited. Yet these feel just as real and authentic as my actual memories. I offered an explanation. That could be a byproduct of the experimental procedure. The creation of artificial memories or confabulations is a known risk with any intervention that impacts memory formation or retrieval. That was my initial thought, Rebecca countered. But these aren't random, fabricated memories. They are cohesive, consistent, and involve individuals who demonstrably exist. I've even managed to verify some of the events and conversations by contacting the people involved. How exactly have you verified them? I pressed. What I mean is, I contacted my colleague, Dr. Kevin Marshall, at the University of Washington, and inquired about a conversation I remembered having with him in his office last month. He confirmed that the conversation transpired exactly as I recalled it. The perplexing issue is, I've never set foot in the University of Washington. I've never met Dr. Marshall in person. And based on my actual memories, I was in California during the precise time that conversation supposedly took place. A familiar chill of unease began to creep over me. There must be a rational explanation for this, I insisted. I've identified 12 distinct instances where I have detailed memories of events that I can corroborate actually occurred, but which I could not possibly have experienced myself, Rebecca stated firmly. Some of these involve individuals I've never encountered and locations I've never visited, all during periods when my actual whereabouts are accounted for. Rebecca retrieved a notebook from her purse, brimming with meticulous notes and documentation. I've been systematically investigating these impossible memories, and I've uncovered a pattern that defies explanation. She presented me with pages of meticulously organized data, dates, locations, names, phone numbers, and elaborate descriptions of events and discussions. All of these inexplicable memories involve other researchers engaged in consciousness studies, memory research, or related disciplines. It's as if the experimental procedures somehow granted me access to memories from other individuals working on similar research. That is scientifically impossible, I declared. Memories are encoded within individual brains through specific neural pathways. There is no known mechanism by which one person could access another person's memories. Rebecca looked at me intently. I understand that, but I also possess detailed recollections of a conference presentation given by Dr. Rachel Morgan at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis last year, including specific questions from the audience and Dr. Morgan's precise responses. When I contacted Dr. Morgan, she confirmed that everything I remembered was accurate, down to the minutest details. Rebecca showed me transcripts of recorded phone conversations she had with various researchers, all corroborating the accuracy of her impossible memories as genuine accounts of real events. Dr. Bennett, I need you to comprehend that I am not delusional or confabulating. I am a trained researcher who has dedicated the past month to systematically documenting and verifying these experiences. I have access to memories that I should not be able to access, and I cannot fathom how or why. Let's assume for a moment that what you're telling me is true, I said, pausing to consider the implications. What do you believe it signifies? I believe it signifies that our current understanding of how consciousness and memory function is fundamentally incomplete, she responded. If the experimental procedure somehow disrupted the normal boundaries that separate individual minds, then everything we thought we knew about personal identity and individual consciousness needs to be reevaluated. Or it means that the experimental procedure caused severe psychological side effects that are producing elaborate delusions, I offered as a counterpoint. That's also a possibility, Rebecca conceded. But if these are delusions, they are remarkably consistent and verifiable delusions. And there's something else. Rebecca hesitated, and I could sense that whatever she was about to disclose was deeply unsettling to her. I am not the only one experiencing this. I've connected with 3 other research subjects who underwent comparable experimental procedures at different institutions over the past year. All of them are reporting access to impossible memories, and there's an overlap in the experiences we are describing. What kind of overlap? I inquired. 2 of the other subjects have memories of conversations and events that I also remember, even though none of us were physically present at those events. It's as if we are all accessing the same set of external memories from multiple perspectives. The implications of her suggestion were staggering. If multiple individuals were accessing the same impossible memories, it pointed to either a coordinated delusional system or something far more unsettling about the fundamental nature of human consciousness. Rebecca, I need to ask you something directly, I stated. Do you believe you are experiencing some form of supernatural or paranormal phenomenon? No, she replied, shaking her head. I don't think this is supernatural. I think it's natural, but it's operating through mechanisms that we don't yet comprehend. Much like radio waves were natural phenomena before we understood electromagnetic radiation. What do you think is truly happening? I pressed. I think consciousness might not be as individual and isolated as we commonly assume, she theorized. I believe there might be ways that minds can connect or share information that we haven't yet discovered. And I think the experimental procedure accidentally tapped into whatever those mechanisms are. And what do you expect from me? I asked. I want your assistance in documenting and understanding what is happening to me and the other research subjects, she explained. I want to approach this systematically and scientifically, and I also need a mental health professional who can help assess whether we're experiencing genuine anomalous phenomena or complex psychological side effects. Over the following weeks, I collaborated with Rebecca to document her experiences and investigate her claims. What I uncovered was profoundly unsettling. Her impossible memories were remarkably detailed, consistent, and verifiable. She could describe conversations, research findings, and even personal details about researchers she claimed never to have met. When I contacted some of these individuals myself, they confirmed the accuracy of information that Rebecca should have had no access to. More disturbing was the discovery that the other research subjects she had mentioned were reporting similar experiences, and their accounts overlapped in ways that suggested they were accessing information from a shared source, rather than generating independent delusion. After 2 months of intensive investigation, I arrived at a conclusion that, as a trained psychologist, I never thought I would reach. Rebecca and the other research subjects were experiencing something that our current understanding of consciousness and memory could not adequately explain. They were not delusional. They were not confabulating. They were not experiencing psychological side effects from experimental procedures. They were accessing information and memories that they shouldn't have been able to access through mechanisms that remained entirely unknown. The implications were profound and terrifying. If consciousness could somehow transcend individual brains, if memories could be shared or accessed across separate minds, then everything we thought we knew about personal identity, individual responsibility, and the nature of human experience urgently needed to be reconsidered. I made attempts to continue working with Rebecca and the other research subjects, but I found myself increasingly incapable of functioning effectively as a therapist. How could I help individuals understand their unique psychological experiences if individual consciousness might not be as individual as I had always believed? 3 months after Rebecca first entered my office, I submitted my resignation from the Tennessee Valley Mental Health Institute. In my resignation letter, I cited personal reasons for my departure, but the truth was that her case had fundamentally eroded my confidence in everything I thought I knew about the human mind. I relocated to a small town in rural East Tennessee, where I now work as a school counselor, addressing academic problems, social issues, and other straightforward challenges that do not require me to confront the mysteries of consciousness or the boundaries of individual identity. Yet, I contemplate Rebecca's case every single day. I wonder what became of her and the other research subjects. I wonder if there are more individuals out there experiencing similar phenomena, and I wonder if the scientific and medical communities will ever be prepared to acknowledge that our understanding of human consciousness is far more limited than we currently realize. Most of all, I wonder if Rebecca was correct when she suggested that consciousness might not be as individual and isolated as we assume. For if she was right, then every therapeutic relationship I ever cultivated, every individual treatment plan I ever developed, and every assumption I ever made about personal identity and individual experience might have been founded upon a fundamental misunderstanding of how human minds genuinely operate. The case of Rebecca Sloan will forever remain, for me, the most inexplicable and unsettling experience of my entire career as a therapist. It irrevocably taught me that the boundaries between individual minds might be more fluid than we perceive, and that the nature of human consciousness holds mysteries that we are only just beginning to acknowledge. Resting more soundly in my quiet town, I nonetheless double-bolt my doors each night prior to sleep, driven by the lingering unease that somewhere individuals may be circulating, possessing recollections that are not rightfully theirs. The profound implications this holds for the essence of human identity and the very fabric of individual consciousness remain, I suspect, something none of us are truly ready to confront.